Hello. We're going to do a mold of bronze gargoyle, which is a dear little thing like this. We've decided that we'll start with the smallest. There are a couple more, and we have to ask ourselves a few questions before we make a mold. One is, why are we making a mold? The main reason being that you want to make many of one, copies of one. The other reason being you want to experiment with different materials. In this case, Bron wants to commercially make these, and she wants to make them in resin. Therefore, we are going to try and make a mold with the least amount of seams, because you want that resin not to have a seam to show, and you want to do as little polishing as possible. It's a fairly simple mold. It has a few deep gouges, and what I'm aiming to do is to create a one-piece mold with a cut along here that will be where we open up the mold. One thing we have to remember is that we have to have a pouring area for our sculpture. So I'm going to take a bit of clay and I'm going to make a pouring area that roughly follows the shape of the bottom of the sculpture, like this. Once that's refined, we're going to work with it slightly up like that. In this case, Bron made the sculpture in clay, which we then fired, and because it's very porous when it is fired, we had to seal it. In this case, we did a shellac seal with a wax finish, and I'm now going to just do an extra coat of release, and that is good old-fashioned spray and cook. I'm just going to do a spray and cook over this. We've got our materials laid out here. Your important material is your scale. In this case, it's an old scale. And it still works. Make sure your battery's working. Then your silicone rubber. In this case, we're using Amstel 25, which we get in South Africa, and we've got our catalyst. In this case, the Amstel needs 2 parts of catalyst to 100 parts of the silicone rubber. We've got as many empty containers as you can find. We've got mixing sticks, a screwdriver to open your silicone rubber with, some clay in case you form a leak and you have to plug it quickly, some gloves, a knife for opening and closing things, and for opening and cutting things, some water, and a old towel in which to wipe your hands with. I'm going to choose any cup, and what I do is I put my cup on the scale before I start, so that the cup measurement doesn't feature. Now I'm 0, so whatever I put in here is only silicone rubber, right? So I'm going to assess roughly how much I need. You can see this is fresh, it's nice and runny. Okay, and I'm going to put it in here. And I'm just going to find an amount, like I'm going to go to 100, which is a nice round number, so it's easy to work out our measurement. All right, so now I take that off and I measure my catalyst. I zero again. Now the scale is not that accurate, so we are going to just try and be as accurate as possible, but okay. So if we need to 100, I generally put in double that in order to speed things up a bit. That is 4 to 100. It only needs 2. But I do want to speed up our setting. Also remember to put the lid back on your silicone rubber. You don't want catalyst going in there. Right, so now we can mix the two together. I'm leaving a little bit out. I'm going to use our first mixing stick. And we are going to stir up this mixture. Okay. And the reason I put a color in the catalyst is so that you can see that you've mixed it through. Right. Now, because we've put a little bit more catalyst in, we've got to be careful of it setting quite quickly. I'm going to start applying it to our sculpture. I'm going to pick it up. At this stage, I just want it to cover everything. I'm going to go in there. I want to get into all these holes. This is something you can do with a small sculpture. Pick it up. So this is your layer that picks up all the detail. Okay, I'm going to put it down, and actually there's so many little crevices. We need to work with gravity here, get the bubbles to come up to the surface. So we've created a little pool for it, for the silicone to pool into. Because it's very fresh, it's quite runny. And then we're going to just blow with our compressor. I don't let the pressure build up too much on the compressor, just its lowest pressure. Just don't want to blow the silicone right off. You can see those bubbles certainly did reveal themselves. Those little areas where we have to fill. There's an area here where I think we need to use gravity to get in there. It is starting to set. I think we're going to let this layer set now. And as the silicone thickens a bit, we'll keep adding to the areas where it's coming off. In order to solve the problem of this very deep undercut that doesn't want to fill, I've broken off a tiny bit of sponge and I'm going to stick it in there to help create that, fill that gap. Yeah, that's helped a lot. We'll fill those eyes with the next coat. So 20 minutes in, with double the amount of catalyst, we'd say 3%, 3 to 100. It is now setting within 20 minutes and it's getting very tacky. We're now going to start mixing our second layer and try and simplify this shape so that we can make a casing for it. You don't want to put on the second layer too soon, because the second layer can pull off the first layer with its own weight. It depends very much on the room temperature as to how quickly your silicone rubber sets. On a cold winter's day it's going to take longer. It also depends how fresh your silicone rubber is, and silicone rubber loves humidity, so any moisture in the air would let it cure faster. When you stir, make sure not to create bubbles, so don't stir like a baker. Stir as much as possibly smoothly without disturbing the mix and bringing air in. Mix. but you have to make sure you have stirred thoroughly. If you are unsure of whether you have mixed this correctly, you can always decant this into another jar slowly, and that way you're also making very sure that you've got everything mixed. But I find with the Amstel, your mixes really, because you need so little catalyst, it always seems to mix well. And if you find a little bit of white as you go to the bottom, you just quickly mix it. I've never had a problem with Amstel not setting. You see there are streaks, but there's a good proportion of color in here because you need so little. Okay. A little bit faster now. Put it all on and then we'll pick it up. We've got to make sure we don't make any caves with our silicone, so we will use the compressor just now. If you don't have a compressor, you can use a straw to blow into these holes. One of the reasons I really like using silicone rubber rather than polyurethane mixtures is that I sometimes don't want to bake my pieces. I want to make a mold straight away. The silicone rubber likes moisture. It cures with moisture. So it doesn't matter if you're using wet clay, for instance, as a wall, or a moist sponge. I'm going to use this here. Otherwise, we're getting there. Getting to holes. Careful of creating a cavity where there's a drip like this and you've got an air bubble cord behind it. Harden. And the next coat we're going to use a bit of a thickener in order to start filling in these hollows. You can see it's getting thicker, it's not falling off the stick. I've tried to fill it in, but it still runs off. So now we're going to mix up a new batch that has a thickener in it, which is called 5X, 6X, and I just hope it sticks. Two holes so I can control the flow. Two holes, one for air and one for flow. And here you just squeeze. I have no measurement, it's just a squeeze. So we've got our catalyst and fixer mixed. Because it's fresh, the fixer will not working so well. Okay, there. You see, it's staying on the stick. It's not pouring off. Now it's a bit like cake icing. You want to just make sure we get it into that hollow there. we're getting a simpler shape, you see. Now we might only need to do a 2-piece casing. You also want to make sure that your silicone rubber doesn't create an undercut. Okay. I'm going to take this away now because it's no longer running. It's a bit sticky. Not sure if this is a good idea right now. Still a bit too soft. Just so I can get in here. Okay, now we are going to, as we discussed, cut here. I want to thicken this bit. I want to create a thicker piece here so we can cut in a zigzag undercut ways, which interlocks when it joins back together again. You'll see what I mean when I show you. I'm putting a thicker layer here. So what I'm aiming for is a nice smooth layer that's not going to have undercut. It's always important to have a key. It's your register for your casing. Okay, so I'm going to put a key here. Your keys can also create undercuts, so you're going to be careful about that. And I don't want to put them here because this is where we're going to split the mold. Your casing has to come off easily. It mustn't have any resistance to your mold. The proof is really in the pudding when you do your card. Because it's silicone, you can always cut it off if it's in the way. But it's better to have a key than not have a key. So as you can see, I'm cutting at a slant, so there's no undercut. But voila, I think we've managed to make our mold. This is what our rubber mold looks like now. We've drawn a line where we intend to just do a cut, and we're hoping we can just peel the whole mold off and then put it together again. But because it's quite thin in places, we have to have a casing. So I'm trying to simplify this mold into a simple 2-piece mold. The casing has to come off really easily. So for instance, there's an undercut there. I'm just going to trim and simplify this mold. Because of the silicone running down, you know, we've got too much silicone here. You can take all of that away. This is actually going to be our pouring area where it's very thin. So I'm going to reveal that. I want to see where we're pouring, so that I know where my next pouring spot for the casing is. It'll all make sense in the end. It just does take a while to understand. I'm going to put it into a bed of clay, and we're going to make one side casing and then turn it over and do the other side. I can see there's a bit of an undercut, but let's just do this side. There's no undercuts here. You don't want the casing sticking anywhere on the silicone rubber. Let's lay it down and into a bed of clay quickly. bedding it down halfway to our halfway mark. This has to be at right angles to your mold. If you go obliquely or something, your other part's going to be the opposite. And your rim must be wide enough for you to drill holes into. You'll see later you need some bolts. I've got my scale out again. I'm using an ice cream bucket because it's nice and wide. I've got a hand drill with a paint mixer. It's really worth mixing your M1 properly. You can mix it by hand. It's not too serious in this case, but when you're casting you want a nice smooth mix. I've cut 3 layers of this triaxial fiber. It's a nylon fiber, it's not glass fiber, so it's not too bad when it comes to, you know, it doesn't cut your hands, it's not bad, it doesn't go into your skin. And then we've got our M1 liquid, material 1, M1, we shorten it down to M1. That's the liquid and this is the powder. It's like a gypsum, like a plaster of Paris, just this is much finer. So I'm pouring in some liquid and I'm going to make it 250. Okay, there's 250 liquid, which means I want 500 grams of powder, so it's got to come to 750. So I'm going to put in my powder. We mixed our M1 outside with the drill and the paint mixer so that it wouldn't splatter everywhere. I'm folding this in half and now I'm putting this in here. I'm really soaking it with the M1 and then I'm putting it over and squishing it down. Folding over the edge because you want a nice, this is the trickiest part about this, is getting a nice strong edge. So it doesn't always want to fold. So basically we've only got one key here. These won't work, I don't think. I'm going to just put this here. This is where the key is. Okay. This one's not really happening anymore. Okay. So I went a bit big with the pieces, but I can maybe cut them and then use them. Now you never want to waste anything. These materials are expensive, so you use every bit of what you use. And you make this casing nice and strong. So it's a simple little casing. It's a simple 2-piece mold, but you just want it to hug your shape nicely. We've got this piece now, it's gone hard, so we can lift our whole mold up and take away our clay and do the other half. We've got a nice casing. It's a nice solid casing with a nice edge. I'm using a little bit of soft clay, just like a clay slurry, as a barrier between the two pieces. And just go over the edge as well. Well, there's a little undercut here which I'm just going to fill in. There's enough of a register. That's my dog. Okay, so now we are ready for our second half. Right, so we have a fairly sturdy casing. We're going to open an angle grind that, but before we open the mold, you have to drill your holes. So you do it roughly about 10 centimeters apart. Amazing how many you should have. It just helps with ever avoiding a leak. Not that you're not going to have a leak, it just happens. But that should be enough holes. And you take your little drill and you want a really good drill bit. Okay. Makes your job a lot easier. And you try not to damage your cable. We've tried to open it, but there's a bit here that's where the two pieces are too sealed. It's also generally the thing to do is to take an angle grinder and just smooth off the edges. That's something that requires a skill and a machine. And I don't know how you avoid not having to do that. But please always wear a face shield when you do it. This is a flat disc, wonderful invention. It's sandpaper that's flat. Always wait for your machine to stop turning before you put it down, or look away. It's a bit like tennis, you've got to have your eye on the ball. And if you find at this stage it doesn't want to open, a little bit of water running fresh clean water under the tap helps. But in this case we've managed to loosen it quite easily, and it comes off very easily on this side. Normally the other side is a little trickier, because we do want to try and keep our original. There, beautiful. This is our opening line, but we don't want to just cut a straight line because that'll just slip and not register. So you've got to create a little register as you go. I can feel I'm down to the, so I'm going to create a little key kind of thing like that as I go down, and maybe one on this side. I don't want to lose that. Kind of a key that'll hold the whole thing in place. Don't cut your finger. And there you go. Obviously I haven't gone through everywhere. There we go. There's my little key there. This is so critical. You can so easily cut the wrong side, make a mistake, or cut too far, and then you kind of mess up the mold. But there's not that much that can go wrong. Okay, so there's a little there. And let's see. This is where we want to just alright, I think, yeah, you need a kind of 2 pairs of hands. Okay, so there's some deep undercuts there, and this is crucial, especially if you've got a fresher material. The clay is quite hard, but we haven't so far lost a toe, and it's come out all in one piece, which is a good sign for your first cast. I think the spray and cook really helped as well as a release agent. So that's picked up a bit of the bronze powder in there. You want to give this a good wash. You look through, you want to look into the light. You can see where it might be a bit thin in places, but it looks pretty solid. Yeah, it's a little thin on the toes here. Good. It's a nice negative, right? Okay. Happy. So we've put in some bolts. It seems a bit excessive for such a small mold having so many holes. But especially working with resin, I think we should have a good solid casing. Right, we're ready for our very first cast. We've actually put water into our mold and measured how much water we need, and also to test that if it leaks or not, and it doesn't. Great bonus. So it doesn't look like much water, and I'm adding plaster of Paris. We're doing a plaster of Paris cast, and you always add your plaster of Paris to your water. And the way I do it, I don't measure. I just have a thing where I quite rapidly pour the plaster in. There's a whole little skill to mixing plaster. You want it to absorb evenly and saturate the water. So you can see in places it's not saturated. So there and there. The rule of thumb is it should take about 10 seconds for all of this to absorb. We've actually saturated it too much. I'm going to add a bit of water. And then you actually let it stand for a bit so that it absorbs the water completely before you mix. Otherwise you get lumps. It's a bit like water and flour, same principle. So you can actually leave it for half a minute and then we'll mix it. It's almost better to have a little bit of a clear liquid over your plaster. Just that clear water, you can just run it off, and that means you've got a very good mix. Okay, now we're going to stir. And you can see it's not lumpy, nice and creamy. Depending on the temperature of the water, if it's a warm day, it can set faster, and fresh plaster sets faster than old plaster. Again, you want to avoid air bubbles here, very important. We don't want air bubbles in our cast. That's why I want to show you how we pour it in. The reason we're using plaster of Paris now is because we want a softer mix than the mold. Mainly checking that there's no leaks, and if there is a leak or a contamination, it's easy to peel off. I want to just pour in a little bit, right? And I don't want to make a mess, so I'm going to pour it in there. And I want to make sure, because it's such a complicated little sculpture, I want to coat the sculpture first. Especially those little toes. We don't want to avoid air bubbles. Being careful not to pour it out because we're going to make a mess there. As it thickens, it'll create a little wall. Okay, I think it's safe now to pour the rest in. Okay, so that's including the little pouring spout now, so we're definitely full. But you see the toes are just there and they can get bubbles. So you just want to shake. Ideal is to have a little vibrating table very useful thing. So I often put my molds on my compressor, and the vibration of the compressor gives me enough, especially if I'm casting in cement. You have to shake. That's it. Now we wait for it to set. This plaster is from Spain, so it's a good quality. Should be nice and hard, and it sets in about half an hour. When it gets hot, you can demold.